The president has a bill on his desk that could change veterans and reservist rights in the workplace. Stephen Herrick is an attorney and expert in Userra. That stands for the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. So what's going to change?
Well, Morris, as you may know, Userra has been around since 1994, and over the course of time, certain loopholes in the protections that Congress intended have been found. And Congress periodically does try to change, fix those loopholes. In the Veterans Benefits Act of 2010, which is the bill that you referred to that's on the President's desk, there were two major issues. One of them has to do with what happens when a company takes over your company while you're away on military duty, and you come back and your company's not there anymore.
Ah, very good point. That happens all the time.
It does happen all the time, particularly in this economy. And the Veterans Benefits Act of 2010 is intended in part to make it more difficult for a company that acquires a company to evade the Userra rights of returning service members who worked for the company that was taken over. That's one of the changes. And there are others that we can talk about as we go on.
Now, has there been blowback to any of this? Because all of this sounds great, but knowing politics, there's got to be some blowback and people saying, no, let's keep things the way they are.
Well, what's interesting about this is that certainly Userra, as a statute that's intended to protect returning service members from discrimination in employment and to provide them with reemployment rights when they return, is a statute that causes some inconvenience for employers. A guardsman or reservist goes on a deployment to Afghanistan or Iraq for 15 months, comes back, their job has been filled. What do you do? So employers do occasionally have some difficulty reconciling their bottom line with the rights of returning service members.
Well, we had news stories about this throughout the Iraq War, and it continues to this day. How long can an employer keep that job open? I mean, is there a limitation?
Well, an employer does not have to keep the job open. The employer can fill a guardsman or reservist or any service member's job immediately. However, when the service member returns, depending upon how long they've been gone, they either have to get their old job back or a job of like status and pay. And so they can give them a similar job. It's just you can't say, I'm sorry, your job has been filled, we can't employ you. You either have to give them their job back or you have to give them a similar job.
What kind of loopholes are in this act? What's been filled and what's still there?
Well, it's very hard for a service member to prove discrimination. And it's actually interesting because the Supreme Court of the United States has just taken the first Userra case that they're going to hear. And in that case, a reservist was fired from his job. And he was able to convince a jury that part of the reason that he was fired was because of his military status, and that's a violation of Userra. Unfortunately, an appeals court reversed that jury verdict, and now the matter is before the Supreme Court, which is going to set out the ground rules of how hard or easy it's going to be for a service member to prove that he's been discriminated against on the basis of his obligation to perform military service.
What kind of discrimination are these service members finding on the job? Is it different from other workforce issues?
Well, there are some similarities and there are some differences. As you pointed out, sometimes a service member comes back from a deployment and finds that his or her job is not there anymore. And that's one form of violation of Userra. Another is, let's say, for example, you're up for a promotion. And a coworker is up for the same promotion, and you have better qualifications, but you're also a member of the National Guard, and you're going to be deployed to Afghanistan in 15 months.
Or there's even that fear from the employer that you might be deployed at some point.
Right, and that's, yes, if you tell your employer that you're, a member of the Guard or Reserve, their natural instinct is going to be, well, you're going to be deployed somewhere sometime, and it's going to be inconvenient for me. So if your boss gives your less qualified coworker the promotion because you have an obligation to go to Afghanistan and that other person doesn't, he's going to stay there, that's a violation of Userra.
Before we wrap up, where can people find more information?
Well, there's a website. The Department of Labor, the United States Department of Labor, is the agency that is charged with investigation of Userra complaints. They have a sub-agency called the Veterans Employment and Training Service. We call it DOL Vets. They have a very helpful website. It's at the departmentoflabor.gov, dol.gov. You go to the link for vets. They have a complaint form. If you think you've been discriminated against, by all means, file a complaint and let DOL Vets investigate it, or find a professional to help you vindicate your claim.
Stephen Herrick, an attorney expert on the issue. It's very top